primaries. But in the meantime, we're going to turn our attention to the national scene. That's why we brought in Mike Hurst, former U.S. attorney. Mike, always good to see you, sir.
Hey, good morning, Gerard. Thanks for having me.
So what a web of legal issues the former president has got himself wrapped up in.
Yeah, you guys might need a full-time legal lawyer on staff here.
Golly.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. We've never seen anything. No one has ever seen anything like this in the history of America.
Well, would you ever think that we would be witnessing a candidate for president likely to be involved in multiple lawsuits concurrently while he's campaigning?
I think you could see a candidate for president be involved in multiple lawsuits. I don't think that would be unusual. What I think is unusual is a former president running for re-election indicted in 3 separate crimes.
Okay.
And that's what we have here. You got crimes relating to, quote unquote, hush money payments up in New York. You got crimes related to confidential documents not being turned over down in Florida. And now you have crimes relating to what has been characterized as, defrauding the United States or trying to overturn the 2020 election with the indictment in D.C. So, yeah, this is pretty incredible. And there's still fodder. There's still talk out there that the Georgia district attorney may indict down in the state of Georgia on similar charges.
That hadn't happened yet. That's coming, though, right?
Well, that's the chatter. That's the chatter.
Okay. But it's been chatter for a while.
It's been chatter for a while, but it seems like the chatter is getting louder or more frequent. And, the press doesn't know, but the press is reporting over the next few weeks that could come down from the state of Georgia.
Yeah. No doubt about it. So the federal charges against the president: conspiracy to defraud the U.S., conspiracy to obstruct official proceeding, obstruction of official proceeding, conspiracy against rights. Let me start with the 4th point there, Mike.
Yeah.
That seems like a stretch there, because what's the allegation there?
Yeah, the allegation is that through the president's conduct after the election in November of 2020 up until January 6th, or even after, for 42 pages, the indictment talks about all the things that he did to say the election was stolen from him. And in that 4th charge you mentioned, 18 Section 241, the charge is all that he did was to deprive someone of their right to vote, or that their vote would be counted. Now, a little history lesson, that was actually passed after the Civil War to try to protect those African Americans who were being disenfranchised by the Ku Klux Klan. Mm-hmm. That is the history of that section.
Okay.
And so for that to be used in this context, I think it's going to be a hard statute and a hard crime to prove in this context. Now, if you read this indictment, the indictment, is 45 pages. Like I said, 42 of those 45 pages relate just to conspiracy to defraud the United States. And it reads like Benny Thompson and the January 6th committee wrote the indictment. And look, you can disagree, and I do disagree. I do not think the president was right to state all these things, saying that the election was fraudulent, it was stolen from him. I mean, the Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr, called every single one of the United States attorneys when I served under him, and he told us to go out and look for this information, look for evidence, look for violations of our election laws. And as Attorney General Barr has stated multiple times since then, there wasn't election fraud sufficient to overturn an election. There just wasn't. Now, every election has fraud, but in this case, there was not fraud sufficient to overturn the election. And the president has not accepted that, and he refuses to accept that.
Still to this day.
But the question is that a crime? And I don't think it is a crime.
Right.
I think, as they pointed out in the indictment, we do have First Amendment freedoms. We can even say stupid stuff. I mean, you get a lot of that here on the calls, but you can even lie. You can even lie. And I think the president here put out false statements. The election was stolen, no doubt about it. But for that to be a crime, I think that's going to be a stretch. That's going to be hard for the federal government to prove.
So, Bill Barr, to your point, this past weekend was on Face the Nation at CBS. I picked up on this last night and said that the latest indictment is, quote, a challenging case. Also said it's legitimate. So he Of course, he was right in the middle of that, as you know, and what I think he states is that attorneys were giving him bad advice, and he was acting on that. And then there were others in his inner circle, as you know, that were telling him, Mr. President, you lost. You lost legitimately, and he wouldn't accept that. And, of course, he asked Mike Pence, send the electoral votes back to the states. And Mike said he wouldn't do that. And he asked him to do some other things, take some other action that Mr. Pence said, no, I don't have the power to do that. Now Pence is calling out Trump, saying he's not fit for re-election. He's actually gone that far. And when he set up his campaign, this is an interesting bit of trivia. When Mr. Pence set his campaign up, the Wi-Fi password in his campaign office was #kept his oath. That's what they set up, which was pretty clear that he expected that Donald Trump would attack him on his refusal to send the electoral votes back to the state. But you're right, though, right? Our First Amendment and our Constitution says you can lie, honestly. That's not against the law. Unless, I guess, you're lying to Congress, right?
Or if you're lying to an FBI agent. There are crimes of lying. But in this case, the charge is conspiracy to defraud the federal government.
Okay.
And the way that the Supreme Court traditionally has defined defraud, that word defraud, as it relates to federal crimes, is the taking of property or the taking of money from someone else. You know, Jeffrey Skilling, you may remember that name from the Enron. I mean, that case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court in the context of this federal crime called honest services. You know, the American people are entitled to honest services from their public officials. And in that case, the Supreme Court said fraud in this context, in federal crimes, has to mean the taking of property or money from someone else.
Oh, okay.
And so that's a big question, as if you're going to stretch 371, which is the conspiracy statute on federal crimes, to defrauding the United States, you know, there's a lot of Supreme Court precedent out there that says that's going to be a tough road to hoe for the prosecutor in this case. So
the prosecutors allege that Mr. Trump knowingly pushed false claims. Does that make a difference?
Absolutely. That's going to be the key for a lot of this, is the criminal intent. You know, if the president can prove that he legitimately thought, as you mentioned, based upon information he received from lawyers, information he received from political consultants, that the election was in fact stolen, that it was fraudulent, you know, he's going to have a pretty good defense, because that would prevent him from having criminal intent.
I see.
The problem he has is his Attorney General, Bill Barr, was telling him, Mr. President, the election was not stolen.
You lost.
You lost.
Yeah.
And so you've got competing claims between those who he had put in power, like the Attorney General had told him the election was not stolen, versus those in his inner circle, some of the private attorneys who were saying, no, this was stolen and we need to fight it.
Isn't that similar to the legal standard for libel and slander, that the person engaged in such activity has to absolutely know that what they're telling is untrue?
There is some similarities there. There are some similarities there, and it's the same in all criminal statutes that prosecutors have to prove intent. They have to prove intent, and I would say even in the tax criminal statutes, there's even a higher standard, which is willfulness. You have to have known the law and intentionally violated the law
to rise to the level of evasion.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Which is criminal.
That's exactly
tax evasion. That makes sense. But if the president just wanted to run around and say, "Hey, the election was stolen," I mean, it's not a crime, right?
Well, and thinking about it in this context, you may remember the 2000 presidential election.
Yeah.
You may remember that was contested a little bit.
Yeah. Supreme Court.
That's what I'm saying. So if Al Gore objected to that election, saying it was stolen and, it should be overturned, does that mean we need to go prosecute Al Gore? No.
Right.
They did it the right way. They went to the courts. The courts went up to Supreme Court. Supreme Court decided it. Well, whichever side you're on, that's the right process to do this by.
Yeah.
And in every situation that I'm aware of where President Trump has challenged these votes, the election, whatever, in court, he's lost. So,
wow.
But again, I don't think in this context, I think the prosecutor is going to have a real difficult time proving a crime was committed, even though you may disagree with what he's done over the last 2 years.
Yeah, totally get it. We got Mike Hurst, former U.S. Attorney, in the Element Wealth studio. We're talking about the various cases against Donald Trump. He's a defendant in a couple of them right now, right? We're coming right back with the studio. We've got Mike Hurst, former U.S. Attorney. Always appreciate him coming in and unraveling all these legal technicalities. And when you've got a former president that's been indicted, that just kind of increases the focus
absolutely
on our judicial and legal systems. So there are many who believe he can't get a fair trial in Washington, D.C., which voted 98% for Mr. Biden in the last cycle, an Obama-appointed judge, correct?
Right.
Which has a history. Of course, the special prosecutor has a history as well, which would not be favorable for Mr. Trump. But one thing I asked you about on the break was their calls for televising the trial, which would be maybe the largest television event in the history of the world. If you think about it, there would be so much interest there. Okay, so I looked it up, asked you about this. Federal rules forbid, quote, the taking of photographs in the courtroom during judicial proceedings or the broadcasting of judicial proceedings from the courtroom. So would this be in federal cases, Mike? Because we do see video and photographs in non-federal cases.
No, that's definitely in federal cases.
Okay.
If you remember, United States Supreme Court has no video whatsoever. You can listen to the audio, and I think I do believe it's at the discretion of each individual United States district judge, but I can't recall ever a federal criminal case being televised. And I don't think they're going to, even as monumental as these cases are and as big as it would be for the country, I just don't think a federal judge is going to allow that to happen because it starts a precedent.
So I was a little surprised that the Democrats have sent a letter. 38 congressional Democrats called on the Judicial Conference to televise the trial. So I'm not sure if the Judicial Conference, they said that's the national policy-making body for federal courts.
Right, that's the group that all the judges are members of and kind of writes the policy, advocates for their federal judges, pay increases, benefits, that kind of thing. But, you got to remember, federal judge is appointed for lifetime.
Right.
I can't imagine 37 elected officials sending a letter is going to sway a federal judge one way or the other. So.
And by the way, this Judicial Conference I'm reading is led by Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts.
Exactly. Administrative Office of Courts is what it's called.
Wow. And so their letter said, requested to explicitly authorize the broadcasting of court proceedings in the cases of the United States of America versus Donald J. Trump.
Yeah,
what a circus.
It's not. I firmly believe that's never going to happen. You'll have reporters in there reporting almost in real time as much as they can. They're not allowed to take, telephones or some are allowed to take computers in, but generally it's prohibited any type of communication while you're in the federal courthouse.
All right, so let's talk about Trump as a defendant, Mike. What can he say and not say? He went out to his Truth Social platform and in all caps, basically said, if you come after me, I'm coming after you, sort of deal. I mean, is that...
I can tell you as someone who has clients, you pray that they do not come out on social media and especially during case, and in this case, multiple indictments, and say anything. But as we all know over the last few years and watching the Trump presidency, no one has control of President Trump. That's one reason he's so popular. But at the same time, when you're in these special situations where you've been indicted, it's probably to your advantage to say as little as possible. And in this case, he's not following that advice at all. In
all caps, if you go after me, I'm coming after you. Now, I sort of reason that perhaps he's directing this at his presidential foes in the Republican primary, specifically Mike Pence and Ron DeSantis, both of whom have come out and really been critical of the president and his questioning of the 2020 results, and essentially saying he's really not fit for re-election.
I think
of course, they're running against him.
Right. I think it depends on your perspective. I would imagine our Democratic friends would think he's saying this to Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, or Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, or Joe Biden. So, but again, it goes back to the First Amendment. The
Okay.
First Amendment. This is a bedrock principle that we as Americans rely upon. We can say almost anything we want if we're not violating those few areas of, again, inciting riots or yelling fire in a movie theater. I mean, but this is how we operate. This is how we're free as a society. You can go and say these kinds of crazy things, and you should be protected.
I've seen Democrats also upset that we didn't get mug shots of the president. How does that work? What are the requirements there?
Well, here the former president is a special defendant in the sense that he has and will always have Secret Service protection. So it's going to be very difficult for any law enforcement officer to put their hands on the president because he is protected by the Secret Service. Now, in most cases like this, if it's a white-collar defendant, the lawyer arranges with the prosecutor for that individual to come in, meet with, probation office, pretrial services, whatever. But yeah, I completely understand that the Democrats wanted a mugshot. That would definitely help in their political ads.
So the president's got presently he's got the documents case in Florida.
And frankly, that's the most, if I were his attorney, that would be the most concerning case. The hush money case up in New York is a stretch. It's legal theory. The indictment in D.C. relating to the stolen election is a stretch. It's a legal theory. The document case is pretty darn solid. I mean, it's if you look at that indictment, they recount how they have actual audio recording of the president showing individuals confidential information and verifying, telling them you shouldn't be looking at this. This is confidential. I mean, that's pretty damning. And not only do you have that, but you have his former attorneys having testified to the grand jury in that case where the president had told them, maybe that document needs to disappear. Maybe you need to just pluck that out of what you turn over to the FBI. And him actually directing his aide-de-camp, his body man, to move documents before his attorneys come over and review them to be turned over. I mean, this indictment, if you rank these indictments, the Florida indictment is the worst one for the president because the evidence is so damning.
And most recently, it's been revealed there's evidence that he instructed a worker to destroy video evidence, right, of them moving the documents around.
Well, and that worker is, again, noted in the indictment itself. That worker took photographs of the boxes and boxes and boxes of documents. Again, you've got to look inside the box to see if there's any classified national security. But that was confirmed once the FBI went there and seized the documents pursuant to a valid search warrant. But he took photographs, sent it to other employees of Trump saying, we need to move these. The president wants us to move these from the, utility room to the bathroom to his place up in New Jersey. I mean, it was insane because they were being instructed to move these documents not retaliation. After the president had been approached by the FBI and approached by the grand jury to turn over these documents.
I got you.
And that's obstruction of justice. That's obstruction of the grand jury proceedings.
Is this also in federal court?
It is.
Okay, so when I mean it's been a while since we had that indictment. When will we see a trial?
I think I haven't kept up with where they are in the process, but I know both parties were going back and forth as to when that trial would occur.
But, I mean, it's possible he could be traveling between New York, Washington, and Florida, right?
That's right.
At the same time dealing with being a defendant in 3 different cases. And then we got the Georgia thing coming up.
That's right, in the Georgia.
While he's running for president.
Right. And, I don't really anticipate the 2 federal cases to go before 2024. And I just say that because there are a lot of documents involved. Anytime a defendant needs more time to review documents, to put his defense together, there's a lot of leeway that is given the defense because you don't want them to come back and say, hey, I was pressured, I didn't have enough time to put on a defense. I mean, those are all reversible errors. And so the judge is going to give a lot of leeway, not unlimited leeway, but a lot of leeway to defense counsel to be able to do that, despite the prosecutors wanting to move to prosecute these quickly.
As you indicated, we discussed him going to Truth Social. If you go after me, I'm coming after you. We're likely to see a lot more remarks from the president out on his social media platform. Is that permissible to use in the cases? I mean, will the other side look at that and try to twist that around in a damning way against him?
Specifically for that statement, the other side would have to say this is somehow relevant to their case, and I think they're going to have a tough time doing that because it's so generic.
I got you.
And as you stated, he's in the middle of a campaign. This could absolutely be directed to his campaign competitors.
But if we got a couple seconds here, but if he said something like that and included the name, for example, the judge, that's a problem, right?
Yeah, that's a huge problem. That could be something where he is locked down and on house arrest at that point if he is threatening any type of official proceedings or federal officials.
Appreciate it, Mike.
Absolutely.
Yep, Mike Hurst, former U.S. attorney, great analysis of the Trump indictment and what we can expect. Coming right back on middays, half an hour later.